What's up, everybody? Did Carson Beck almost end up with the Crimson Tide of Alabama? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, I want to start here with a story that came out yesterday that Georgia pursued Carson Beck in the transfer portal, according to a report. This is from Matt Hayes over at USA Today, reporting that Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs were the first to reach out once Carson Beck entered the transfer portal. Carson Beck previously announced his intentions to enter the NFL draft, but Hayes' report says Georgia was interested in a reunion. Now, this runs contrary to the reports that were out there. I believe 24/7 Sports had the report that said there was a little bit of a sour exit between the two parties. They didn't like how Beck handled himself following a season-ending elbow injury in the SEC championship game. Georgia went down to New Orleans to get ready for media day at the semifinal. Carson Beck didn't show up to the media day. Ended up joining the team a day later. Matt Hayes kind of puts a little bit of a, back push on that one, saying a person close to Beck's decision-making, speaking on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the process, told USA Today Sports that not only was Georgia at the front of the line for Carson Beck, who had been eviscerated by Georgia fans on social media since the Bulldogs' early exit from the playoff, but SEC heavyweight Alabama also called. We'll get to that in just a second. But Carson Beck signed with Miami less than 48 hours after hitting the portal with a do not contact request, leaving a lingering question: who was to blame for Georgia's offensive regression this year? And of course, as Matt Hayes says, the easy answer was quarterback. And he goes on to basically point out all the big issues that Georgia had this year. They led the country in drops by receivers. The offensive line was inconsistent. The run game was inconsistent. The play calling was inconsistent. I mean, there was a bunch of issues with Georgia's offense this year. And all that said, I mean, they still won the SEC, right? For all the blemishes that they had. And of course, the interceptions were costly and not great. But Matt Hayes basically says, the fall guy here was Carson Beck. All quarterbacks are to blame, and they get too much credit at times and probably get too much blame at times. But it is very interesting because, again, the report we had heard and we even talked about here on the show was that, there was, supposedly, I don't know if animosity was the right word, but a little bit of a fallout there between Georgia and Carson Beck. And so when he entered the portal, it's pretty interesting that Georgia did reach out, said, hey, what's going on here? Now, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place here as well, because if Carson Beck wanted to come back for one more year, well, you've already committed to, Gunnar Stockton and, as the future. And so if you bring back Carson Beck another year, maybe Gunnar Stockton decides to hit the transfer portal and says, you know what, I'm going to go play elsewhere. And this is, just a year after you lost Brock Vandergriff, who was waiting in the wings. He went to Kentucky, just, said, let me go play there if I'm not going to play here. So, and on top of it, you got the freshman Ryan Puglisi, who's waiting in the wings behind him. So, odds are if you were going to bring Carson Beck back for another year, you were going to lose one of those guys. And so it's this tough domino effect of, if you're Georgia, like, were you completely in love with Carson Beck and bringing him back? But again, according to Matt Hayes' report, yes, they did reach out. Now, here's the other intriguing part of this story is that Georgia was not the only SEC powerhouse to reach out to Beck after he entered the portal. Hayes reported that Alabama also made contact with the former Bulldog. And the Crimson Tide, they do not have an experienced quarterback on their roster right now, with Jalen Milroe declaring for the NFL draft. He says, of course, Beck, ended up committing to Miami after entering the portal. He'll replace Cam Ward, and they'll have playoff aspirations there. But the quarterback situations in Athens and Tuscaloosa remain uncertain. In fact, with Alabama, Milroe entering the NFL draft, he threw for 16 touchdowns, 11 picks in 13 games this year, led Alabama to a 9-4 record, but Alabama missed the playoff, and they want to make the playoff next year. And so ESPN, they put out a piece predicting starting quarterbacks for every Power 4 college football team next season. They're predicting redshirt junior Ty Simpson will win the job. Now, Simpson is a former 5-star recruit, committed to Alabama back in 2022, the native of Tennessee. He's the only signee from 22 to 24 still remaining with the Crimson Tide. Of course, Eli Holstein ended up at Pitt. Julian Sayin went to Ohio State. Dylan Lonergan just moved on to Boston College. And in 3 seasons with Alabama, Simpson has completed just 29 of 50 passes for 381 yards. Also waiting in the wings is 2025 recruit Keelon Russell, who was the number 2 player in 24/7 Sports rankings. He led Duncanville, Texas to back-to-back state titles, passed for 10,000 career yards and 115 touchdowns in his time in high school. But, given Ty Simpson's experience, it's likely that, Kalen DeBoer is going to give him every opportunity. But if the talented Keelon Russell is that elite, then he will get an opportunity. But I do think it is very interesting. What if Carson Beck had ended up at Alabama? I think that would have been, would he have elevated his game more with a guy like Kalen DeBoer and, offensive-minded coaching staff kind of focusing on his strengths and saying, hey, let's help you here. Let's make this thing work. And I don't know, just kind of an interesting thought. How realistic was it? Probably not very realistic, but when you lose a guy like Milroe who had all that experience, yeah, it's going to be tough for that Alabama coaching staff to go after a 9-4 season. Let's commit to Ty Simpson for the year, or again, just Keelon Russell blow everybody away in summer and fall practice and say, hey, he's going to make a real push for the starting job. We will see. But anyway, just an interesting thought. And Carson Beck having lost to Alabama multiple times in his career would have been very interesting to change jerseys and switch over to the dark side and go over to the Crimson Tide. But alas, he is at Miami, and they're paying him, $4 million in an NIL deal reportedly, and wish him the best of luck over there. But Carson Beck out of the SEC now, despite potential pushes from Alabama and Georgia. All right, the other big news to come out of yesterday, Quinn Ewers officially formalized his NFL draft decision. He made it no secret he intended to leave Texas. Remember at the Cotton Bowl pregame, he told Pete Thamel that, hey, yeah, I'm planning to go pro. And that was amidst some reports out there. I think On3 had a report that, he's got like a $6 million NIL deal on the table. And some reports were perhaps it was Notre Dame, some other schools interested as well. In fact, I even heard the Alabama buzz for Quinn Ewers out there. Well, the drama and the intrigue is all out the window now. He dropped a video talking about his gratitude to Texas and said the past 3 years have been some of the best years I could have imagined. Relationships I've built with coaches and teammates will last forever. And played in 36 games for Texas. Did battle some injuries at times, but went 21-5 as a team starter and led the Longhorns to back-to-back college football playoff appearances. And they won, he won the Big 12 in 2023. Got to the SEC championship game in year 1 of their membership in the Southeastern Conference. So that is quite an accomplishment. And, one caveat here, I did see, okay, he declared for the draft. Well, if you remember a couple weeks ago, Carson Beck declared for the draft before he decided to flip course and go, well, you know what? I'm going to come back to school and I'm going to enter the transfer portal. It kind of surprised us. Well, with Quinn Ewers, if you read the ESPN article, they cite his agent talking on his behalf. And so, that you can, the caveat, you can declare for the draft, but not sign with an agent. And then you still have, I believe the deadline is February 7th, somewhere in there, to pull your name out of the NFL draft consideration. Well, if you sign with an agent, that's it. It's done and you're moving on. But it is kind of interesting though, because we live in this day and age where kids right now have agents for NIL deals. And there is some crossover there. There are agents who are also NFL rep agents who are also handling NIL deals for college kids. So there's a lot of crossover there. And so it was like, okay, well, that's Quinn Ewers' agent, but is that his NIL agent or is that his NFL agent he signed to go to the NFL with. Anyway, it was just kind of an interesting dynamic of this ever-changing world of college football. But again, talked to multiple people. Quinn Ewers is moving on. They said there's no chance he's pulling out of the draft. He signed with his agent, and he is off to the NFL. And he'll finish his college career ranked third in the Longhorns all-time passing list with over 9,000 yards and 68 passing touchdowns. So congrats to him. Great run, great career for Quinn Ewers. And, we had a chance to talk to him multiple times at SEC media days and stuff. And class act, good kid. Wish him the best of luck. Will be a first-round pick? Not likely, but we'll see what he does at the combine. You never know. Could certainly turn some heads and, move up draft boards, but we will see. Best of luck to Quinn Ewers there, and best of luck to Carson Beck over at Miami. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we got some Tennessee Vols news. We'll get to that coming up here in just a second. First, I want to remind you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And look, from the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel is making the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That is $300 to keep the action going. And of course, the FanDuel app's super easy to use and navigate. All the different bets they got there are going to keep every game exciting for you. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for hours upon hours for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has got you covered. And just go visit them at their website. That's FanDuel.com. Get signed up, join today, and you will get started with that $300 in bonus bets with your winning first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And we got some Tennessee news, kind of interesting. Yeah, some good news, some not so good news. So let's dive right into it. Let's start with good news. I don't know, depending on what kind of Tennessee fan you are, but Tennessee thinks of their coordinator, Tim Banks, as very valuable. They have closed in on an extension that will keep the 53-year-old defense coordinator running their defense in Knoxville for the foreseeable future. He was a finalist for the Broyles Award, given to the top assistant coach in the country. And Tennessee had one of the best defenses in the country this year, holding 11 of their 13 opponents under 20 points. And a stout defensive unit was one of the big reasons why the Vols made a spot in the 12-team playoff. Of course, the playoff game didn't go great. Defense gave up a bunch of points of yards to Ohio State, but nonetheless, congrats to Tim Banks. As Chris Lowe tweeted out, Tim Banks of Tennessee finalizing that extension to keep him remaining as the Vols DC. And he joined Josh Heupel and his staff in 2021 and has been with the program ever since. Been a major factor with turning that defense around, which, remember, a couple years ago, it was pretty putrid. But before that, he was a DC at Illinois in 2012 through 2015. Stayed in the Big Ten, became the co-DC at Penn State from 16 to 20, and then came to the SEC in 2021. So going to have to see that defense. How do they look, losing all those pieces like James Pierce and a bunch of different pieces they're losing to being seniors or the NFL draft. But, look, it was no doubt Tennessee's defense was much improved last year. We'll see how much better they are or if they could sustain that success next year. Now, I told you that's good news. Again, could be bad news if you just didn't like what he did in the bowl game and you're a Tennessee fan and you're super, critical of Tim Banks and what he's done with the defense. But the not so good news for Tennessee, this news coming out yesterday that DB Jermod McCoy suffering a serious significant knee injury, according to one report. According to VolQuest's Austin Price, McCoy tore his ACL during a training session earlier this offseason. The report says he has already undergone surgery to repair his knee, and he is slated to miss all of spring practice and summer workouts. But the report did say that they're hoping to get McCoy back to action close to the start of the 2025 season. Remember, we're mid-January right now, so plenty of time before we get to the start of the season, but he was one of Tennessee's best players during the season defensively. Sophomore DB had 44 tackles, 9 pass deflections, 4 interceptions, and was a big reason why this defense was so good and how they got to the playoff for the first time in program history, college football playoff, I should say. But 2024, his season was good enough to earn him second team all SEC honors, and the hope was that he could take that leap to being one of the top corners in the country. And so we'll see. ACL tear, not what you want to have from one of your best defensive players in the offseason, but the good news is plenty of time to go for the start of the season. So if you're going to have one of these injuries now, you'd rather have it now and miss the time of spring and summer workouts and all that. Because, look, you know how good he is. And he knows the system. Tim Banks is still back, you know what I mean? So doesn't really need the reps. You know how good he is, and the hope is you just get him back fully healthy for the start of the season. So certainly something we'll keep an eye on, and best of luck to McCoy as he works on his rehab to get back out there on the football field. Some other news and notes over at Mississippi State. They picked up a transfer commitment from ex-Georgia wide receiver Anthony Evans, former 4-star prospect, spent 2 seasons at Georgia before entering the portal. And on Wednesday, he announced he is heading to Mississippi State. Over 2 seasons with the Bulldogs, he caught 13 passes for 123 yards and a touchdown. But he did make an impact on Georgia's special teams units as a returner. He returned 17 punts for 129 yards this year. Also had 7 kickoff returns for 124 yards. And some projecting that as a role he could slide right into at Mississippi State. And he joins the Mississippi State program that hoping to take a big leap forward in year 2, after year 1 was certainly disappointing for Lebby and his group. But he will get an opportunity to face his old team on November 8th when Georgia makes the trip to Davis Wade Stadium in Starkville. He will have 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Over at Ole Miss, their former running back Matt Jones has decided to, or we knew he entered the portal, but now we know where he is headed. The running back entered the portal back in December, and he will reportedly stay in the state of Mississippi, and he will head to Southern Miss. Of course, he rushed for 226 yards, 3 touchdowns for the Rebels this year. Overall, he played in 23 games with the Rebs in 3 seasons, ends his time in Oxford, and best of luck to him moving on. One other tidbit of news here, congrats go out to Lenore Sellers, taking home the National Offensive Freshman of the Year award over at South Carolina. So, of course, he was very, very good this year with his passing and running ability, and named the National Offensive Freshman of the Year by the Football Writers Association of America on Wednesday. Stayed in his home state. Everyone surrounding the Gamecock program was grateful for that last fall, and finished the season 9-3, surpassing a lot of expectations of what the Gamecocks could be. And his stats this year were very interesting. I mean, the running ability, had a longest run of the season was 75 yards, averaged over 4 yards per carry. And if he can improve as a passer, get some more pass catching weapons around him, that South Carolina team can be very, very dangerous next year. And talk about building off of it. Okay, you get to 9 wins this year, 10 wins next year, get you in the playoff, most likely. So can Lenore Sellers elevate that team under Shane Beamer? That will be very, very interesting storyline to watch heading into 2025. But congrats to Lenore Sellers. Congrats to Shane Beamer. Quite a lot of postseason accolades and honors they are getting. All right, still more to come here on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day right here on Locked On SEC. First, I want to remind you about our friends over at Prize Picks. And this message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports, whether it is the playoffs or regular season. Prize Picks, they've made it easier for you, easier than ever to win big while enjoying all of the football action. And now it is playoffs time, and there is no better time to get in on the action with Prize Picks. And here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. And if your pick hits, you win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. And, for the playoff games this weekend, You can do very simple things. I mean, if you like Lamar Jackson for more than 250 passing yards, if you like Travis Kelce for more than 70 receiving yards, you just pick the more than or less than. And it's fun to predict, easy to play. And with the Prize Picks Flex Play, you could still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you can get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. It is Prize Picks. Go run your game with Prize Picks. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. As we head into our final segment, did want to touch on ESPN putting out their 2024 college football All-America team. And look, there were a lot of good choices out there, but a lot of SEC teams made the list. Of course, the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter, making the list, but there were plenty of good options to jump into. And Kelvin Banks, who was one of the better offensive linemen in the country, expected to be a top 10 pick here in this coming year's draft. He was named offensive tackle on ESPN's team. As they said, despite a left ankle injury that sidelined him for the SEC championship game, he was a centerpiece of a Texas O-line that paved the way for one of the most balanced offenses in the country. The Longhorns are one of 6 FBS teams to average more than 275 yards passing and 160 yards rushing per game. The 6'4", 320-pound junior won the Lombardi Award this season as the nation's best collegiate lineman, and has been a starter at left tackle since his true freshman season. Again, been a guest on our show multiple times. We wish him the best of luck in the draft, and congrats to Kelvin Banks. The postseason honors continue to roll in. How about in Florida? Center Jake Slaughter named on the ESPN All-America team. Florida's offensive line improved steadily in the latter part of this season when the Gators won their last 4 games, and Slaughter's play was a big reason for that. A redshirt junior who has announced he will return for the 2025 season. He allowed just 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit in 728 snaps this year, according to Pro Football Focus. So congrats to Jake Slaughter. They did list some second-team players on these lists, and Cooper Mays made that second-team list from Tennessee. We had him on over at SEC Media Days. An Alabama Crimson Tide member making that first team at guard, offensive guard Tyler Booker. Here's what ESPN writes. Booker was a powerful blocker in the run game during all 3 of his seasons at Bama, was a 2-year starter at left guard. Also started 1 game this season at left tackle, recorded a team-high 87 knockdown blocks, did not allow a sack at 715 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus. He did declare for the draft following their bowl game. And rounding out the O-line over at LSU, Will Campbell at LSU. Here's what ESPN writes. From the time he set foot on campus, Campbell was a fixture on LSU's offensive line at left tackle. And this season, he played every offensive snap, 866 of them, in 11 of LSU's 12 games. He shared the Jacobs Trophy as the SEC's top blocker with Kelvin Banks, and he's headed to the NFL after 3 seasons at Baton Rouge. Mel Kiper's got him rated as the number 2 tackle in this draft. One other guy on this list, Dylan Samson, was named second-team running back behind Ashton Genty at Tennessee. So congrats to Dylan Samson. Great honor there. On the defensive side of the ball, a couple of SEC guys. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, the starting defensive tackle. Say after transferring from A&M, Nolan had his best season at Ole Miss. He's big at 305 pounds, 6'3", but he has great burst. Nolan led all SEC defenders with 12 tackles for a loss in the league games, and is the kind of interior pass rusher all defenses covet. And of course, he's a great run stopper. At linebacker, you had Jaylen Walker from Georgia making the list. The Butkus Award winner is the nation's top linebacker. Second team behind him was Jahad Campbell from Alabama. So congrats to both those guys. Also at linebacker, the young guy, Anthony Hill, the epitome of a do-it-all linebacker, went from being one of the best true freshmen in 2023 to one of the best defenders in the country this season. And, of course, he got another year. Be a true junior next year. 6'3", 235 pounds, sophomore, led the Longhorns with 113 tackles, tied for 4th most among FBS linebackers with 16.5 tackles for a loss. Second team they listed here, Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. So, again, a little honor there for Danny Stutzman. And then the secondary, the corner from the SEC, they've got listed here, Jahdae Barron, where they say Barron was already widely viewed as one of the top corners in college football, then only raised his stock in helping limit Ohio State star wide receiver Jeremiah Smith to just one catch for 3 yards in their playoff semifinal loss to Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. But Barron, 5'11", 200-pound redshirt senior, was the Thorpe Award winner as the best DB in the country and tied for the team lead in a talented secondary with 5 interceptions. So, yeah, a lot of talent on that Texas team. We spent the show earlier this week talking about all the guys that are heading off to the NFL draft and are done. But Jahdae Barron is a starting corner on the ESPN All-America team. Second team, they listed Jermod McCoy from Tennessee. And again, but tough news on him with the torn ACL, but great honor for him. And just a few other second-team defensive honors from the SEC. They've got Malachi Starks from Georgia at safety. They got Michael Taft, second team from Texas, their safety. And then second-team defensive end, they have Kyle Kennard from South Carolina, who, of course, was named the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So good list for ESPN. A lot of well-deserved talent and names on there. And maybe showing a little bit more love to Dylan Samson and some of those other national publications did this year. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. And hey, for your second listen, check out some of our other great podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering some of your favorite SEC teams. Chris Marler covering you with South Carolina, Luke Robinson with Alabama. Check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Locked On and your favorite SEC school, and you will find that there. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. You guys have a great day. Remember to check out our squad edition, our roundtable discussion with some of our other Locked On hosts. You can find that right here on Locked On SEC later in the day on Thursday. But for now, everybody have a great day. Everybody will talk to you tomorrow.